Hi everyone, today we are swatching my Mission Gold paints. I think I have 28, well 29 including Chinese white, but we will not be swatching that one. I had the 36 set, and this was the palette that you order it separately, but I can't remember back in 2020 when I first got this if it came with the 36 set or not. There is a version of that, at least back then there was. I have since replaced some of the colors, didn't repurchase some because they were extremely light fast, or non-light fast, I mean, opera, and I went through a phase where I was getting rid of a lot of my fugitive colors. And not that I'd repurchase them again, but you know, I would still use them. I'm not too worried about that stuff anymore. I know if I commission something or if I put something in a show, then I'm just going to use the colors that I know are light fast. And now that, you know, we have the information with pigments, you can just kind of be discerning. But yeah, I went through that phase where I was like, oh no, it's not light fast, I can't keep it. So I made this little palette for one of the people at my eye doctor who did watercolor painting, and I gave it to her as a gift. So I say all that to say I only have 28, 29 including the Chinese white of these colors. And so if you were to purchase the 36 set, it may have a lot of the colors that are in this palette, but some of them I switched out and put in myself for because they were either single pigment or it was just a spot that needed to be filled in the palette for color balance. So I'll be using the last piece of my Valhong cold press paper in this block here. This is really rough. It's not their rough grain, but it's what I would consider rougher than the average cold press paper. So this first one is Permanent Yellow Light, and I think I'm going to probably do 4 rows, kind of like long rows, 1, 2, 3, 4 with 7 across. So let's see if I can estimate that correctly. This is one of my favorite yellow pigments. It is PY 154. And it's a really, really bright, cheery yellow. In fact, Mission Gold's version is probably my favorite. I think in the Winsor & Newton you would know it as Winsor Yellow. And I do have that one. I haven't compared them, but I don't know, when I got it in Mission Gold, I really fell in love with it. Even though yellow isn't a color I use a whole lot on its own, but I use it to mix greens and stuff. So this next one is PY 65, I believe, Permanent Yellow Deep. It is, most people would know that as cadmium yellow. And if I accidentally run the yellows together, I am sorry, because yellow is hard for me to see. I'm going to, going forward, do some wet into wet, because that's kind of how I like to see the paints behave. But with yellow, I'm not going to be able to do that. So let's see, let's make a little wet area here. The next one we're going to be swatching is just what they call just orange. I mean, it just says orange on it. It doesn't say just orange. It says orange. And I believe this is, oh gosh, can I remember? Yeah, it's PO73 and PY65. So your cadmium yellow and your PO73 orange pigment. It's a nice orange. Nice bright orange. I have autumn orange in here, but because you can't move these wells around, I have it closer over here next to the burnt sienna and stuff. That's probably my favorite orange. Next we have permanent red. And with this area here, permanent red is a fugitive color, but it's a nice red. It's PY112. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that is Naphthol red. You'll know it also is permanent red in Daniel Smith. It is a little deeper than Pyrrole. Pyrrole is light fast, but I do like this red. It's a little on the opaque side, but it's a nice color. And by the way, I'm just using my Zen Art number 6 synthetic round brush to do these swatches. Next we have, I believe this is Rose Madder, but I want to check and make sure. Permanent red. Yes, we have Rose Madder next, and it is Friday, rush hour. So we've got especially loud traffic. This is Rose Madder, PR176, which is actually pretty typical for Rose Madder. I thought I wetted that, didn't I? This paper, because it's so textured, requires a lot of water to make things move. You can get some really nice dry brush action on this paper because it's so, and it's like a finer than usual, also cold press texture. Okay. Next, after Rose Madder, we have, I believe this is QUINACRIDONE Rose. PB19, usual. It's a nice strong version of PB19. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, good. Room for one more. And I'm just gonna make sure we are going in the right order. Rose Madder, Quinn Rose, QUINACRIDONE Crimson Lake, PR202. You will know that as QUINACRIDONE Fuchsia in Daniel Smith. So let's see. QUINACRIDONE Crimson Lake. It's an interesting way to name it. At least it is a quinacridone color. They were right about making sure that that was still an indicator of what type of pigment this would be. So it's really nice though. I think it is definitely closer to crimson than fuchsia. And the thing about Mission Gold paints that I think are they do stand out as very strong, very pigmented, more than most. And if that's your style of painting, and it's, you know, you like bolds, and or you want to make your paint last a long time as far as watering it down and getting some thin washes, this paint's, you know, packs a punch. So we have Bright Clear Violet next, and this has a very interesting pigment that I've never seen before. I'm imagining that it is fugitive. It's PB3:1, but then it's got Ultramarine and PR122, which is Quinacridone Magenta. So these two make a really strong, very clear violet. But this addition of the PB3:1 is, yeah, it's pretty interesting. I had never heard of that pigment before. And, okay, rose, crimson, violet. All right, so make sure I am in the right spot. So again, this is Bright Clear Violet. This was in the original set of 36. And I was also trying to get single pigments after I either had to replace or had run out. Or like I said, I had made that, given some away to a friend or to somebody I wanted to give a gift to and show appreciation. But yeah, this is Bright Clear Violet. So it's got one staining pigment in there. I would assume that the PB3:1 is a staining pigment as well, but the PR122, which is Quinacridone Magenta, it's a pretty staining color. And that is a nice violet, I mean, I must say. The next one is Ultramarine Violet number 2. So in a lot of these Asian or Eastern paint companies, whether it be the Korean paints, the Japanese paints like Holbein, or the Chinese paints like Paul Rubin, they have 1 and 2 versions of things like Jaune Brilliant number 1 and 2, Cobalt Hue number 1, Cobalt number 2. So this one is the, which one is this? This is the number 2 version, because I wanted the single pigment Ultramarine Violet. I had never tried Ultramarine Violet before. And when I first squeezed this one out, it had a lot of pigment, binder separation. So I was trying to get a stronger swatch here. But it is typically kind of a lower on the lower end of tinting strength. Granulates, you know, it's a nice color. But you can see the difference between these two as far as violet. This one's a little more blue. And it is PV15. Ultramarine Violet number 2. When I was looking up the pigments, I saw the number 1 version has like 3 different pigments in it. So that would be the difference. This next one, I believe, is PERYLENE Violet. No, PERYLENE Maroon. Sorry. It's PERYLENE Maroon. Gosh, does these already need to be cleaned? I think so. But maroon's a dark color, so we'll go ahead and swatch it. It's 179. This is your typical PERYLENE Maroon. This pigment is often used as a replacement for alizarin. They'll call it permanent alizarin crimson, and they will use PR179 for that. Let's go to this Jaune Brilliant number 2. I believe this one is. This is a mixture as most Jaune Brilliants are, which is very, very similar to Naples. I mean, to me, they're kind of interchangeable. Is PW6, PO73, PBR7, and I believe PY65. So that's 4 pigments. And I put the Jaune Brilliant next to the earth tones because sometimes I'll use this as a skin tone pigment. Skin tone color? Skin tone pigment? Alright, next we have Autumn Orange, which is my favorite orange pigment. And that is PO36. Where are we? See how this palette is kind of, you get kind of lost. It's got great mixing areas, and I like that I can separate my cooler, darker blues and greens from my reds, oranges, and yellows. But and the palette's pretty lightweight, but yeah, it's kind of cumbersome. And this is a nice deep, I mean, exactly what it sounds like, autumn orange. It is great for leaves, and I like to mix this color in to skin tones. That's why it's near the burnt sienna over here. And speaking of burnt sienna, is burnt sienna next? Let me see. So we have gold ochre. It's a very dark ochre, and I really, really like it. It is PY42. Oh, I didn't wet the paper first. Oh well, I'll do it now. It's a nice transparent ochre, which I've come to really appreciate. As far as ochres go, I look for, this reminds me a lot of Daniel Smith's Italian deep ochre, which almost acts more like a very deep raw sienna. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Got one more left for this row. And I believe the next one is Van Dyke Brown, then Red Brown, then Burnt Sienna. And I like that their Van Dyke Brown is a single pigment color. I'm getting lost in this palette. It says on my swatch sheet that this is Van Dyke Brown, PBR7, which to me looks and acts a lot more like just a regular burnt umber, which is kind of what I was going for. I didn't want to buy a burnt umber. I wanted something similar, as I was trying to just get something different than repeating what's in my palette, all my different palettes, trying to make them somewhat different. You know, granulates like it would any other PBR7, but Van Dyke Brown is typically a cooler brown. So let's move on to what is supposed to be, I believe, Red Brown. Red Brown is PBR25. Pretty good description of the color. It is a reddish brown, but it is the, and PBR25 is what you would call permanent brown in Daniel Smith. Staining color, very, very strong. It's almost like a deeper, darker, stronger burnt sienna. Okay, so burnt sienna would be the next one. Now, their burnt sienna is interesting because I think it's usually pretty unnecessary to make a 4 pigment burnt sienna, but you know, that's kind of what made this palette interesting too, is the burnt sienna in here was going to be a crazy mix. So the burnt sienna, although when you swatch it, yeah, you know, looks like burnt sienna. PR112 is in here, so you'd recognize that from the permanent red. And see if I can remember all of them without looking at my notes. It's PBR, or I'm sorry, PR112. No, I won't be able to remember because there were so many. Okay, it's PBR25, which was in our red brown, PR112, which is our permanent red, and PY150, which is nickel azo yellow. So you've got a red, a yellow, and a red brown making up this burnt sienna. And the fact that it looks pretty much like a burnt sienna is pretty crazy. But the fact that they had to use all those colors was also pretty crazy. So next, oh, I should have looked to see what was next, huh? Next we have Dyke Green. So now we're on to the other side of the palette. And we're starting here. So this is Dyke Green. And I think Dyke Green is just PBR7 and PG7, which makes sense. It's a brownish green, very, very dark brownish green. PG7 is your typical phthalo green blue shade. And PBR7 is your earth pigment brown, burnt sienna, burnt umber. But I really do like this Dyke Green because it's like a nice, rich, almost like a foresty green with granulation. Okay. Next, I think is sap green. I want to, if I can remember. Yep, sap green, and I like their version of sap green because it's PG36 and PY150. But a lot of sap greens are mixed with like a brown or, you know, a more opaque color like a yellow that isn't nickel azo yellow. But I am going to double check. Sorry, the one after Dyke was greenish yellow, not sap green, so that makes sense actually. So the greenish yellow is the one that is like very greenish yellow. It's a PY150 and a PG36, so that's like as greenish yellow as you can get. They do have one called yellowish green, which is really opaque, and it had the pigment switched, but I think they used PY65, which is a more opaque color, and I wasn't digging it, so that's one of the ones I got rid of. Anyway, so this is greenish yellow, and the next one is sap green. Those are the two we have switched around. So sap green is still PG36 and PY150, and greenish yellow is PY150, PG36, which is still the same pigments, but yes, they did add a PY65, so that makes it a little bit more opaque. And it was looking a little bit more Viridian to me. And this is not a, let me see, Van Dyke, greenish yellow, sap green. That's Viridian. The next one is Viridian. But it did kind of feel like Viridian and look like it. It's doing that thing that Viridian does. Because it's not as strong of a green. But it's definitely a little bit more opaque. Okay, sorry about that. You know, it's always a thing. I'm always gonna mess up something on the swatch videos. Van Dyke, greenish yellow, sap green, and now Viridian is this fourth one. It's just PG7, which is your phthalo green blue shade. So it's not a true Viridian, it's just what they're calling Viridian, which a lot of student grade lines will do that, because Viridian is not only is it hard to re-wet, but it's more of like I guess I'm gonna call it a mineral pigment, even though don't quote me on that, but because it granulates so heavily and it has very low tinting strength, similar to like a potter's pink or any of those types of colors, then it's probably more expensive. Next we have Prussian Blue, typical PB7. Let's wet the page. Nice color. I thought I only had Prussian Blue in M Gram, but apparently I have it in Mission Gold too. See, that's another reason why I do these swatch videos, is it helps me to review my own paint if it's been a while since I've used it. And since I've used it, I probably had learned some other things, so, or forgot some things. Okay, I believe this is Cobalt Blue. So it's literally just a mix of phthalo blue red shade and ultramarine, which are both red leaning blues. So I mean, they, you know, I don't know. To me, that's just weird. But again, just like with the Viridian, I think that they do that sometimes to, in student lines to save money. But this isn't really what I would consider a student line. And you can tell, even though they're all pretty easy to re-wet, this one's slightly more difficult because it's got the ultramarine in it. And that's just, you know, how ultramarine is. It's a little drier. It's like one of the paints that dries the fastest when you palette your paint. But I mean, you could just mix that yourself, you know. And Cobalt is granulating, so I guess they're trying to mimic that with the ultramarine. Next, okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more colors. Okay, yeah, Cerulean Blue is next. It is PB15:3, so it's literally just your phthalo blue red shade. It does not say that it has PW6 added to it, but most non-cerulean blues do have PW6 added to them. And look how strong that is. It is not cerulean. This is probably the only really disappointing color, although I know what pigment it is, so I know how to use it. It's the only one that I would be like, you know, come on. And compared to the one next to it, they did get a pretty decent, like, alternative to Cobalt with that. But this, come on, this is cerulean. This is supposed to be cerulean. I would have even been fine with that if they would have added white to it, because cerulean is a paler, more granulating, like sky blue. So yeah, I mean, I do have Chinese white in here. I could always mix it in there, but you know, if you're gonna call a color, even if it's not that pigment, then try to make it look like that one. So I think the next one is indigo. Yes, indigo. And I like their indigo because it's got an unusual mix, and every brand has their version of indigo, like their Payne's Gray. They will have their own like proprietary mix of this type of color. So I'm fine with that. I know it's always going to be a mix. It's PB29, PB27, which are ultramarine and Prussian, and then PBR7, which is you know, burnt sienna or burnt umber. So that makes it a little bit more gray leaning and more Payne's grayish. So yeah, I kind of like that, because I typically use a lot of Payne's Gray, and I like it when the indigo is like just a darker version of Payne's Gray. So I would definitely reorder that one. And make sure I get the right one, because these two are switched. So again, this is PB29, PB27, and PBR7. That's a nice indigo, isn't it? It's like a nice, very dark, very blue Payne's Gray. All right, next, in this row we have, I can see that it's cobalt turquoise, and this is going to be cobalt green deep. So I won't even have to look at my notes for those. However, I am going to check my water. And I think the one on the end is probably the cleanest, so cobalt turquoise is going to need some clean water. And cobalt turquoise is a granulating color. Their version of it is, I believe, oh gosh, maybe I do have to look at my notes, because people do use different cobalt pigments for the cobalt colors, even if they are true cobalt. PB28, there's PG26, there's a few different ones. So I do believe this is, I'm gonna be wrong, watch. I'm gonna say this is PG36. I mean, I'm sorry, not 36, 26. PG36 is phthalo green yellow shade. But this is cobalt turquoise, as you can clearly see. And it is a greener turquoise, or greener cobalt. So let's see. We've got cobalt turquoise. It's PB28, which is normally cobalt blue. So that's interesting to me. Very, very interesting. And PB36 is the cobalt green. But this is one of my favorite cobalt colors. I love it. It's beautiful. I like it for backgrounds a lot of times. So next we've got PB36. And that is cobalt green deep. One of the things I appreciate about Mission Gold, them being easier to re-wet for colors like the cobalt colors and ultramarine and some of those harder to re-wet colors. And yeah, look at that. I used to not like cobalt colors because they were cobalt, but then I started using them and it's like, oh, they're so pretty. I've always wanted cobalt yellow. I think they have cobalt yellow in this line. Oh gosh, can I see which color this is? One's black and one is sepia, so let's just throw them down and maybe I'll be able to tell. One is ivory black and one is sepia. And the ivory black is PBK7 and the sepia is PBK7 and PBR7, so your typical burnt sienna or burnt umber with black. Same black that's in the ivory black. So I believe this is the ivory black. And the next one is sepia. Where am I? Okay. I'll probably mix these up. That's probably sepia and this is probably black. There's a lot of black in that sepia, so when I first laid it down, now that I'm looking at them side by side, I'm pretty sure that's sepia and this one is black. I mean, I obviously could totally be wrong, but see that brush, that dry brushing going on in this paper? This paper's crazy. If you like that type of texture in your watercolor painting, I think you'll really like this paper. This is the Bao cold press. And yeah, with that, that would be the end of the swatching. Let me know if you guys own these paints, if you like them. I'm probably going to use them in my next piece of artwork that I post, so keep an eye out for that, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Bye.